Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the Amy Rushworth Show. I'm so excited to dive into this episode with you today because it's one of my favorite topics, one of the most incredible parts of the work that I do, and also one of the things, or one of the topics that I get asked about the most from people on Instagram, my clients, and all the people swirling around in my world. And that is how to unleash your big voice, let your self expression go wild, and how to be comfortable and confident being more visible. So, we're kind of going to weave a conversation around all of these pieces. And I'm going to give you a bit of an entryway and some steps and some techniques, things to explore if this is a desire of yours to use your voice more, to express yourself creatively in the world. Maybe you're someone who's been afraid of being canceled or afraid of judgment for using your voice, whether that's through your business or at work or with your family, whatever area it applies to. You can use what I'm going to teach you in this episode and apply it to your context and circumstances. And just got to say, once again, I'm really excited about it because this has been such a huge part of my journey as well. Using my voice, healing my throat chakra. It's probably one of the biggest areas of healing that I've become acquainted with over a decade of my own healing. And it's a huge part of my work. So let's stop fucking around and just dive in. I want to talk about normalizing your inner critic so that you can activate this bold voice without dying of shame and dying of self-criticism and wanting to be small every single time you just try and use your voice and share your heart with the world. So a lot of the teachings and the dialogue that I've seen around this are usually centered around fucking off your inner critic or getting rid of your inner critic, becoming completely fearless. And I don't think is particularly helpful because we all have an inner critic, no matter how much work you've done on yourself. And of course, we can heal the intensity of that critical voice inside of us, but all of us have parts inside of us that are here to protect us. And the inner critic is one of those inner protectors. And it has like a really nice intention in many ways. Your inner critic, even though it can be really nasty, and even though what it says to you isn't fully accurate, even if it says to you, your voice doesn't matter, don't say that, its intentions are really beautiful. It's wanting to keep you safe. And sometimes it just does that in really dysfunctional ways. My approach is more like normalizing, neutralizing, listening to that part of you with compassion so that it doesn't have this full chokehold over your life. It's just one of the many inner advisors within you that you can listen to sometimes and also know when to not listen to it or to listen and to leave the advice to the side. So, unpopular opinion, your inner critic is not the enemy of you having a confident and expressed voice in the world, but maybe the way that you've been dealing with it or working with it isn't actually very effective. Part of the work that I do, and a big part of what's going to be sort of enmeshed into this program that I'm releasing soon, that I'm working on. You might have seen me tease it. It's called Burn the Rules. It's not available right now, but it will be soon. So stay tuned. Is this idea of getting acquainted with this inner critic so that it isn't like this big beast in the dark that you either completely try and ignore, but it doesn't go away, or the opposite, where it just completely overwhelms you and then you choke up and you can't say anything at all because the inner critic just has this loud microphone in your ear. So, one of the modalities that I love to weave in when doing this work is the wisdom of somatic parts work. And this is derived from internal family systems. This modality, this therapeutic modality, believes that we all have many parts of us. We have lots of internal parts within our consciousness, and they're interacting all the time. And sometimes they're bashing heads. And there's a couple of main key parts that I want to teach you about so you can start to map in your mind when these parts are taking over and stopping you from getting out there, using your voice, sharing your opinions. So we have protective parts inside of us. There's two different kinds of protective parts. We have proactive protectors. These are sometimes called the managers inside of you. And then we also have our reactive protector parts, and these are sometimes called the firefighters. So the first kind of protectors, these are the parts of us that are always thinking and planning, analyzing. That's the part of you that's watching for how other people react when you say something. So if you've ever, been scared of public speaking and you've gone to do a talk, maybe you notice like, oh, you're looking for people's reactions in the audience, or you're looking to see if anybody's annoyed by what you just said, or you're kind of mapping people's facial expressions when you're saying something that's a bit more bold or a bit more controversial. Your proactive protectors, your managers are watching for that. They're analyzing and they're trying to maintain control over the inner and outer environments. These parts of you are preemptive, so they're trying to prevent your wounds from getting activated. So if you have a wound around using your voice or saying what you really think, being honest, maybe you have a history of people pleasing, dimming down what you really want to say, sugarcoating so you don't piss people off. Your proactive protectors are doing that because they're preempting a bad reaction. They don't want that bad reaction to happen because they don't want your deep wound around being disliked or facing conflict to get activated. They're trying to keep you out of unsafety. And these parts of you believe that if they don't stay alert, that you could get hurt. So as you can see, these parts of you have your best intentions in mind, but again, they just have found dysfunctional coping patterns in order to make that happen. And they never want to rock the boat. They're vigilant. They're always scanning the environment. This part of you might also be almost like the inner whip cracker within you that's like, never do that again, or work harder, like prove yourself. These parts can take all different thought patterns, sort of vibes, flavors. But now that you know that they're there, you can start to map what part of you comes online when you're about to use your voice. Or, for example, say somebody invites you to do an interview on their really big podcast, your proactive protector might show up in that moment and be like, oh, no, 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 we don't want to be seen by that many people. Or the part of you that gets really nervous, that might be part of your protective parts system. Or it could even be the part of you that doesn't really put yourself out there at all, or doesn't, go for the opportunity at all, or hides on your social media, or doesn't put your hand up in the business meeting or the work meeting because that preemptive part of you thinks, we don't want to be put in a position of danger. And if you've associated using your voice with danger, which many people have, because as children, a lot of children are told to be less loud, to be polite, to be compliant. It makes complete sense why we have these preemptive parts of us that believe it's unsafe to use our voices. The other protective parts of you are the reactive parts. So the firefighters, they're the more impulsive, reactive parts of you that are there to help to extinguish or put out really strong emotions. Usually these parts are hated the most by the other parts of you. And these firefighters can exhibit a range of different behaviors. And some of these behaviors can be really extreme. So this could be the part of you that lashes out when you feel like you weren't heard, or the part of you that wants to run away after someone doesn't like your opinion and they try and like start beef with you. For example, say you were getting canceled online, your reactive protective part might be the part of you that's like, we're out of here. Let's go ghost social media for like 3 months, or let's, fight this person who's saying this mean stuff in my comments. The third part of you that I want to introduce, these are sometimes called the exiles or the young burden parts of you. So your protectors are doing everything in their power to try and protect these exiles inside of you. These exiles and these exiled parts inside of you hold what's the most tender, like the deepest wound. And for many of us, it's something around being unlovable or bad, or that we don't deserve to be here. And for some people, it's a terror that doesn't really have language around it. It's a wordless sense of deep sadness or terror or grief. Where it originated is that something got frozen or locked away inside of you. So a deep imprint, a deep belief, a deep wound. It's usually from early childhood for most people, and it's locked away in the body. If these parts of you get brought to the surface, it can be a very physical and very visceral experience. So you might feel that lump in your throat. You might feel a huge wave of emotion or tightness in your chest, or that sinking feeling in your gut. And this is also why modalities that I use, like rebirthing breath work, are really powerful, and they can feel really physical and emotional because they bring up some of these exiled parts. And it's a very like sensational experience because these exiled young burdened parts of us are typically stored in the body. The issues are in the tissues. This part of you is desperate to be heard and seen, and it longs for redemption. And it's why many of us end up in these patterns where we keep trying to complete the story and get the fairy tale ending, or we keep cycling in the same coping mechanisms. This part of you really wants to have that redemption. It wants to be forgiven. It wants to know, hey, maybe it's not true that I'm unlovable. Maybe I'm not bad, right? But if we're not aware of how all these parts exist together, or the atlas in how they collaborate and how they move together, then it's very obvious why we keep cycling in the same issues with any part of our life and our bliss and the fullness of how we live, but especially with self-expression, because using our voice is very tender. It's usually riddled with a ton of wounding for many people. And so many of us, especially women, have been shut down all throughout our life and told that our voices don't matter. And if we have a young exile within us, a young burdened part inside of us that says, I'm unlovable and I don't matter, and then you have a world outside of you that also perpetuates the idea that your voice doesn't matter, or that you don't deserve to be heard, or that people will come for you or criticize you, persecute you if you use your voice, it becomes this crazy self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you just blame yourself. You think, I'm just not a confident speaker, or I'm just not a bad bitch, powerful woman who knows how to use her voice. Or even, you get led to believe that you just don't have anything to say. And the truth is you do. So understanding that your inner critic is one of these protective parts is so like life-changing in my opinion, because you can stop thinking, oh my God, I'm broken, and there's this bitch in my head. Why am I always having these thoughts? And you can start to reconcile the fact that this part of you is trying to protect the most tender part of you. It's trying to protect you from having to feel the most tender wound inside of you. And this is why body-based healing is incredibly powerful and transformational for starting to transform that inner critic, because our mind is going to be very good at tricking us. Our mind is also helping us not to see those deep, tender parts. Our mind is full of distractions from those really painful areas inside of ourselves. And so body-based healing helps us to start to listen to those parts of us. And that really is the key to healing your self-expression. It's like learning to, yes, take action, face your fear, become more confident through using your voice, but also paying really special attention and listening to these parts of you. Listening to it doesn't mean going, okay, yeah, everything you said is true. I am a piece of shit with nothing to say. It's like listening to that part of you, even if it's being irrational, listening to that part of you and asking, what's beneath this? What is this thought protecting me from? what is this belief about what I have to say or what people will think of me? What is that actually like armor in front of? There's always something underneath. This is leading on to the next thing that I wanted to share. This is why self-compassion and any work that you can do around compassionate self-inquiry, building your self-love, anything that builds your self-esteem is so important to any work that you're doing with your self-expression or healing your throat chakra, because you're touching and you're listening to some of the most tender parts of you. And you're listening to parts of you that are saying anything to stop you from getting into that position of unsafety. And like I said, they'll be ruthless. They'll say all sorts of things to keep you from moving out of your comfort zone and having the potential of those wounds or those deep fears inside exposed. Compassion is the seed from which all of your best, most empowered self expression is going to grow. And it's going to also be a building block for you to build resilience. And resilience, I think, is very important when it comes to using your voice, especially if you're using your voice in a polarizing way. Perhaps you're an entrepreneur who's listening, who wants to share unpopular opinions online, or just say it how it is, right? I think people in this day and age are really afraid to say how it is. And I include myself in people, by the way, because I feel like in 2022, especially, I just literally became a smaller version of myself out of fear of being canceled and fear of saying the wrong thing or hurting someone's feelings. And it was really self compassion and the resilience that I had previously built throughout my healing journey that's allowed me to kind of come back out of my box and be like, fuck it, right? Not everyone's going to like me. And I'm a compassionate person to other people. So I ought to give that to myself too. Yeah. And same for you. So compassion, self kindness is going to help you to have that more gentle, loving understanding with yourself, especially if you use your voice and maybe you hurt someone's feelings, or you use your voice and you feel inadequate, or you do a podcast interview and you think, oh my God, I just completely like fucked that one up, or I wish I didn't say this, or I wish I said it better, all the different thoughts that can happen, right? So having some kind of way that you continuously remind yourself that it's okay to be imperfect, that it's okay to fail or to experience difficulties. It's okay to be a beginner or a work in progress with using your voice. This is going to help you to be more resilient, which is going to help you to keep going and keep making moves that allow you to become more confident in your expression and how you speak. When we don't practice that kindness, and then we have that inner critic who's trying to protect us, it's going to be an overwhelming wave of like critical energy. You're going to be soaking in a soup of criticism, maybe from the outside and then also within yourself. So self-kindness and compassion is going to help you to balance those scales. It could be as simple as saying something really nice about yourself in the mirror once a day, or affirmations that you repeat that remind you who the fuck you are and that you're deserving of love and tenderness and kindness, no matter what mistakes you've made or how you're imperfectly growing, whatever it is. So being able to meet those shit days, regrets, mistakes, mind fucks with kindness is going to help you to create that emotional equanimity that leads to you becoming more confident in your voice. And when you're more confident, you're going to take more action, and then you're going to get more and more powerful in your voice. The third thing that I think is super, super helpful when it comes to those low confidence days, or the days where you're really struggling to use your voice, criticizing how you're expressing yourself or how you're not expressing yourself, is to remember your common humanity. So what do I mean by that? Remember that this is not a unique you problem. Now, this is kind of like the tough love news, but it will make you feel better. Usually when we're struggling or we're really, really deep in the voice of that inner critic, or even maybe external criticism is happening to you, like if a lot of people are judging you or criticizing you, it's very easy for us to get into this mindset of like, woe is me, and oh my God, I'm an idiot, or oh my God, this is the only, like, I'm the only person that this would ever happen to. I'm the only person who would make a mistake like this, feeling shame, all of these things. And we can tend to get in this consciousness of separation or feeling like everybody else just has their shit figured out around this, or it comes naturally to them and it's so hard for you. And we can get into this very small, contracted space where we just think, I'm all alone. I'm all alone in this issue. Why am I the only one who struggles with this? And the truth is that we all have inner critics. We all have areas where we feel less confident. And sometimes people who appear really confident in their expression actually have to deal with a ton of stuff internally in order to show up that way. This is a collective thing that everyone goes through in their own way. Not that we want other people to struggle in order for us to feel better, but I think when you aren't feeling great or you're struggling to use your voice, it's just a helpful, quick reframe to remember, like, oh, I'm not special. Everyone goes through this. Then from that mindset, you can think about maybe someone that you really admire or someone who embodies self-expression in a way that you think is just like badass and you're like, girl, you're amazing. And remember, that person also has an inner critic. That person also has inner demons. That person also has inner protector parts and exiled parts within them that they're facing off with and listening to and doing their own work around all the time. I think it just gives you that perspective shift of like, okay, it's not just me. There's nothing inherently wrong with me. I'm just having a human experience that lots of people experience, if not everyone. So remembering that helps us to feel less alone. And when we feel less alone, we're going to show up in a different way. So be willing to see things differently and remember that it's not just you. And there's plenty of people who do amazing things and have really powerful voices in the world that also have those days and those experiences. Myself included, by the way. I have like a pretty intense perfectionistic part of me. One of my inner protectors is the part of me that's like, always have your shit together, always know what to say, always have a calm, collected look and vibe about you, never react. That's my inner protector, right? And so if I ever kind of speak a bit wobbly or I say something and I upset someone or I react kind of impulsively, this part of me gets really angry. This part of me is like full of shame and is like, why did you do that? Why did you say it like this? There's another protective part of me that thinks that I'm not a good speaker, right? And no matter how many people have told me the contrary or the 300,000 listens to this podcast, that part of me is still there, right? But I've learned how to listen to it and be like, okay, that part of me is trying to protect me and it's not necessarily facts. So remembering these parts and remembering that we all have these parts, I think is very, very healing and just helps you to kind of snap out of it a bit when you're in that inner suffering. This is more of a simple technique that I want to share next. I think it's really useful on an ongoing, consistent basis, like every other day, but especially on the days where you're doubting your voice or you're feeling scared to use your voice. Give your brain a ton of evidence that it's safe to be different or not liked by everyone. So there's a few ways you can do this. Maybe there's someone who comes to mind that you love on Instagram, or it could even be a book that changed your life, like a book that you think is just the hot shit, amazing, couldn't say a bad word about it. We all have something that we think is the bee's knees, right? Or someone. Then you can start to realize like, hey, not everybody actually likes that book or not everybody actually approves of that person. Some people dislike that person. And you start to realize like, even though I thought that book was absolutely amazing and I wholeheartedly believe that, there are people who have left it a 1-star review, or there are people who unfollow that person all the time and just don't vibe with them. And I think sort of externalizing it like this helps you to recognize how personally we take it when other people don't like us or they don't vibe with what we're about. It's so easy to just think, oh my God, this one person doesn't like me, and then to ignore the thousands of people who do, and to just take it like a knife to the chest. You know what I mean? I totally understand this right now, and that's why I'm laughing. I'm a Leo, and I like in true Leo style want everyone to love me, you know. When someone doesn't like me, I'm like, why don't you like me? You know? But that's just one part of me. And I've developed these other parts of me through gathering this kind of evidence, this disconfirming evidence for my brain that says, oh, like this person that I think is amazing, some people don't like her. Don't know what's wrong with them not liking her, but it's cool. I still love her. And it just helps you to like gather all that evidence to the contrary, of that belief inside of you that says like it's not safe to not be liked by everyone. Like I have to be liked by everyone. The truth is, not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to think even that you're a good person, maybe. They're seeing you through their own preferences, their own values, their own lived experiences, maybe even their trauma. They're seeing you through the lens of that. Giving your brain all of that information of like other people or things that you like, I think it just helps you to bridge that connection, you know, more strongly and be like, okay, it's all right if they don't like me. There's people who don't like Beyonce, right? There's people who don't like, you know, your favorite TV show. Doesn't mean that it's shit. It just means that they're not about it. And then you can also extend that to yourself, right? There are people that you don't like. There are people that you unfollow on social media. There are people whose books have 1,000,000 5-star reviews and they're on the New York Times bestseller list. And you're like, yeah, it didn't resonate for me. Not into it. It doesn't have to be so personal. And not everyone has to like us. But sometimes our inner protector parts that I keep mentioning, they are trying to get everyone to like us in order to feel safe. But it's actually an impossible feat. It's impossible for every single person in the world to agree with you. How would that even be possible? It's like trying to make gravity not exist and then spending your days upset every day that you can't just levitate into the sky. Right? So if we can't control the fact that not everyone's going to like us, maybe we get to loosen some of that control and remind ourselves constantly and remind these inner protector parts of us, like, I hear you want to control the fact of whether people like you or not. But also, as a mature adult, I'm telling you that it's not something that's possible. And thank you for trying to protect me, but we're all right. The next thing I want to talk about is having supportive people in your corner, if you can. And at the very least, like if you're in a situation where you can't necessarily fully get away or cut off relationships with people who are judgmental of your voice or your opinions, etc., at the very least, don't ask people who have never left the ground for flying instructions. I read that somewhere. I can't remember where I read it. It was something like that, right? And I loved it and I always remember it. So why would you ask for instructions or directions from someone who's never gone to where you're going or someone who doesn't even have the same values as you? So, you know, for example, if you have a mother who's been in a really sort of repressed relationship her whole life, doesn't use her voice, lets people walk all over her, why would you then take advice from her that says something like, I don't think you should say that online, or you should be more polite, or you shouldn't do this or say this? Like, do you actually want advice from someone who is embodying that in their life? Or would you take advice from someone who is using their voice really vivaciously and boldly and confidently and who's really in their power? It doesn't mean that you can't have conversations or you have to just like erase everyone who's important to you in your life. I think having healthy disagreement with people is actually a vibe. It's part of having a growth mindset. You don't have to just let go of everyone in your life if they disagree with you, but can you try and have people in your circle or in your corner who do support you. And maybe they disagree with you, but they support you anyway, right? So how can you get into more conversations, more rooms where people are really celebrating your voice and wanting to lift you up in that journey? Last thing that I want to say, I was like, is this the last thing? I have so many things I could say on this, but I'm going to save some of the like deep, juicy shit for this program, Burn the Rules, and maybe something else that I might be announcing in the next couple of weeks, but stay tuned. Sorry, I'm such a tease. The last thing that I wrote down and I wanted to share with you, every stretch tones your expression muscles. So if you think about going to the gym and building muscles, or say you were training for a marathon, you know inherently that that journey isn't just going to be easy peasy all the time, right? The actual point is like it's hard and you get through it, and then you create those little micro tears in the muscles, and that's what tones them and makes them get stronger. Or when you're training for a marathon, you know, you build up, like each time you go for a run, you try and hit that new personal best or run, you know, a few minutes longer, whatever it is. In that context, we know stretching yourself, like moving beyond what is comfortable, is what is helping us get to the goal. And it's actually one of the reasons that we want the goal in the first place, because we want to experience that process. When people run a marathon, they want to experience the drive and the perseverance and the showing up and the consistency and the inner grit that it takes to push themselves out of their comfort zone of what they've previously done. So the same is true of self-expression. It being hard for you is not a reason to not use your voice. It being hard for you is the reason that you should use your voice. In the words of Nike, just do it. So listen to these inner parts that I mentioned, do the inner work, be compassionate, but also the action is what is going to move the needle. So you're not going to become more confident in using your voice by journaling about it every day and not ever using your voice, not ever getting outside your comfort zone. Part of how you build confidence is through facing fear, and facing that fear in small manageable doses and then increasing the intensity or increasing the exposure is how we build confidence with anything. So for example, I was really scared of riding a horse because I fell off a horse and got dragged the first time I ever rode a horse when I was like 10. And then I never rode one again. And so the fear of that and the fear of getting back on a horse just got bigger and bigger and bigger the more that I delayed ever getting back on one and stagnating and saying one day. And then recently, you might have seen on my YouTube the vlog that I did on Valentine's Day. I got back on my horse, figuratively and literally. So I got back on the horse. My horse was the biggest horse in the group as well. And we were going up these really precarious mountains. And now I feel like 100 times more confident to get back on a horse, even though I was scared on the horse. I was scared getting on the horse. I was scared when we were going up and down these rocky mountains, but I did it. And now the fear is less pronounced for me. I'll still be scared the next time I do it, but I have more confidence in my pocket. I have like more of a fire to build that confidence more and more to face that fear. And so the same is true of anything, including creatively expressing yourself in the world, using your voice, becoming more confident. You got to use your voice even when it shakes. And so the key is to not throw yourself completely in the deep end, that it like traumatizes you or just feels too much, too fast, too soon. But to think about like, what's the healthy stretch for me? The same way you wouldn't go from running 0 kilometers to running a marathon. You would start by building it up in small manageable doses and stretching a little bit out of your comfort zone each time. So how this might look for you with self-expression, say you're someone who wants to build your business online, how can you start stretching those visibility edges? Maybe it's doing your first live stream and just say, okay, I'm just going to do it for 5 minutes. And then the next time you do it for 15 minutes. And then the next time you do it for an hour. Then over time, you launch your own podcast. Then over time, you get on YouTube, whatever it is. that's how you're going to have that confidence to be able to hold the level of visibility and to become more confident in what you're saying, to feel more grounded in what it is that you believe and that you have to say. And the same is true if you're afraid of conflict, right? Say you're someone who's afraid of using your voice because you're afraid of conflict. You're always going to be afraid of that conflict until you literally get back on that horse, until you have those hard conversations. There's a quote that I love that says something like, hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. And then there's another quote that I recently saw. I'm sorry that I can't credit to who it is because I just saw it in my Instagram feed, but I loved it. And it said something like, if you're afraid of having hard conversations in relationships, be prepared to have hard relationships. And it's true, right? Like, the juicy shit is on the other side of doing things that are outside of our comfort zone and doing hard things. So remind yourself, I can do hard things. And not only can you do hard things, when you do hard things, you get more confident. You bring more ease to that thing. You feel more power around it. And you feel fucking powerful because you are courageous enough to face it. And so use your voice even when it shakes. Use your voice even if you're going to say the wrong thing sometimes. And then say sorry after if you need to, or forgive yourself and do better and correct those mistakes if you need to. But don't not use your voice out of fear that you might make the mistake. Because the biggest mistake is to not use your voice ever at all and to live a life where your gifts, your opinions, the beautiful things that you have to say die and rot inside of you. And you have medicine for other people. Whether or not you're a business owner, a healer, someone who shares your stuff online, every single person in this world has something to say and words that are the exact same shape as someone's wound. You have things, experiences, reflections, and insights, no matter who you are, that can help other people, that could help them to heal, that could help them to see something in a new light, that could help them to feel loved. But they will never get that if you aren't the person who's going to be courageous to work on healing your voice and loving yourself in that messy process and daring to believe that what you have to say is important, because it is, even if some people don't agree and some people don't like it. Okay. I feel like we spoke for long enough. Probably need to do a part 2. Let me know if you liked it. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but if you review the podcast and send me a screenshot on Instagram or send it to my team, support@amyrushworth.com, we will give you £100 voucher towards pretty much any of my courses. So if you've been eyeing something off and you want to invest, then all you have to do is review. And if you love the show, I would hope you would want to do that anyway, as like a little reciprocal energy exchange. So take a moment now if you want to and do that. I will see you in the next episode or over on my new YouTube channel, Amy Rushworth Official on YouTube, or over on the gram. This is Amy Rushworth. Loving you big, adoring you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you have the most beautiful day full of inspiration and motivation after this episode.